You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Recent tech company protests are highlighting the connection between worker power and free speech here in Seattle. On Sunday, protesters, including current and former Microsoft employees, kayaked across Lake Washington to the homes of Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella and President Brad Smith. From the water, they unfurled banners with slogans like Satya plus Brad equal war criminals. This was the latest in a week of action calling for the company to cut ties with the Israeli military over its operations in Gaza and the West Bank. Protests at Microsoft's Redmond headquarters led to several arrests. KUOW labor and economy reporter Monica Nickelsburg was at the campus covering one of those protests, and she's here with us to discuss the specific demands of Microsoft and how the state of the tech industry right now is changing employee power. Monica, thank you so much for being back on Soundside.
Always happy to be here with you, Libby.
Oh, and we'll try to get that microphone up and running to make sure that we can hear your lovely voice. Monica, you were at Microsoft's protest on Wednesday. What exactly happened?
Well, there were about 30 protesters who rode in on bicycles. I had kind of a sense of where they might be coming from, so I was just sitting at one of the entrances to Microsoft's East Plaza, where I saw these folks wearing masks. It was kind of clear who they were, riding on bikes to the Central Plaza, where Microsoft was hosting a kind of summer farmers market for employees with the DJ. So the contrast between the two events was very stark and I think intentional on the part of the protesters. They put up a sign that said Liberated Zone. They unplugged the DJ, and then they started making speeches and leading chants about the war. Security was hot on their heels. They responded basically instantly and put up some barriers and began telling employees to go around. But the protesters themselves started grabbing those barriers as well as tents and tables and anything they could from the farmers market to kind of create a barricade in front of themselves. Eventually, the Redmond police arrived and 18 people were arrested.
So going to Satya Nadella and Brad Smith's home, that seems like an escalation. Is this likely to change anything about how Microsoft responds to these protests? We go from the campus and then to the homes of these executives.
I do think it's an escalation, but I don't expect it will change anything immediately. So where things stand now, Microsoft says it's launched an investigation following reports that its Azure cloud services are being used in the mass surveillance of Palestinians. Until that report comes out, I don't really expect there to be an immediate change.
So what are the demands that these employees are making of Microsoft, Monica, and what kind of change would they like to see from the company?
It's pretty simple. They want an end to all military contracts with Israel.
And how has Microsoft responded to these protests and to these accusations?
There's been a little bit of an evolution. So after the first protest, Microsoft put out a statement saying that it's committed to human rights standards and that it's investigating Israel's use of its technology. But after the second one, where the arrests were made, the company seemed a little less tolerant. A Microsoft spokesperson accused the demonstrators of vandalism and of impersonating employees. Microsoft says that only one protester was a current employee and that there were maybe a handful who had been fired from the company for similar conduct, and then mostly outside actors. I'm not able to verify that, but I did speak to a current employee who was protesting that day, Julius Sean.
And is Julius worried about losing his job at this point?
He expects to lose his job, but he's not really worried about it. Here's what he said.
I am also at a point in my life where I think I am actually looking to just pivot what I do with my career and how I earn money. So it was kind of a natural decision to me to say that this is the position for me to take right now. I have the privilege because I know that if I lose this job, I'm okay with that. I want to move on from working in technology, knowing that so many of the large companies are complicit in powering things like genocide and war crime, and I'm happy to move on.
So he went into this expecting that he was going to lose his job, and it's a sacrifice he's willing to make.
I mean, that's a position that a lot of people are not in, obviously, but this is something that he has thought about, clearly. What did you hear from other Microsoft employees that didn't participate in this protest, Monica? I mean, what did they think about the No Azure for Apartheid movement?
Yeah, this is something I really wanted to understand, like how isolated, how fringe, as Microsoft claims, is this position that the protesters are taking. So I walked around the crowd of just regular employees who were watching, and several of them told me, I'm supportive of what they're doing, but I don't want to lose my job. I can't talk to you. That was the case for an employee who eventually came back over to me and did agree to talk using just her initials, AN, because she has a new baby at home and she's scared to lose her job.
The whole thing was pretty emotional. Like, I have a kid now, you see some of the stories that are coming out, and it's like me who might have lost their kid or lost their family members. And, knowing that we're connected to something like that is really sucky. Microsoft's gotten more aggressive about layoffs and the way they changed their reward structure. So, I'm not in a position to lose my job, so I'm definitely scared to say anything openly.
And it sounds like she was crying when she was talking to you.
She was, yeah. She was genuinely very upset about the situation.
I mean, we saw a lot of protests during the last Trump administration, Monica. Amazon Employees for Climate Justice is a group that comes to mind for being really active in pushing Amazon to change policies. But overall, there doesn't seem to be right now as much activity from tech workers as there has been in the past. I mean, this no Azure for Apartheid excluded. As these Microsoft protests make headlines, why do you think we aren't seeing more protests from other local tech companies that have hubs in Seattle?
I mean, I almost feel like the question is, why are we seeing any protests at all? The climate has changed so much since the first Trump administration. At that time, when we had that surge in tech worker activism on things like immigration, military contracts, there was just so much competition for tech workers. There was really this sense among them of like, if I lose my job speaking out at Amazon, I'll get hired at Facebook tomorrow. The risk was low.
Mm-hmm. There were a lot of options.
There were options. This time around, it's just completely different. Thousands of tech workers have been laid off. They're struggling to find new jobs. And the tech industry itself has kind of moved to the right. There's less of a fear of alienating that workforce. So activism today just feels higher risk and lower reward to a lot of workers. That's what I heard from Veena Dubal. She's a law professor at the University of California, Irvine, and she focuses on the tech workforce.
There's a smaller and smaller number of people who have that feeling and who actually aren't replaceable. And so with tech companies moving towards doing more work abroad, having more of their work done by international workers, also, just really pivoting to using machine learning systems for basic tasks, I think that workers do understand themselves as being much more fungible, and that instills fear in them.
I mentioned earlier that there are other tech companies that do have ties with military activity, with, for example, contracts with Israel, but we see this protest activity specifically at Microsoft so far in the recent months. Is there something unique about Microsoft's relationship to Israel that's leading its employees to protest more than those other companies like Amazon or Google? Or is the employee culture different? I mean, what's going on here that No Azure for Apartheid has been able to at least gain the momentum that it has?
So Microsoft's relationship with the Israeli military is not something that I have investigated firsthand, but it is well documented in other news outlets that Microsoft's relationship with the government there is particularly close. And Microsoft's lead in AI and the ways that the Israeli military is using AI to improve its efficacy in the war are leading to a lot of scrutiny. I think there is a sense that there's some involvement among many of the major tech companies, but when it comes to this particular use case, Microsoft is sort of leading the charge.
When it comes to the executives, I mean, we've seen a pivot in how tech CEOs are responding to the second Trump presidency. When President Trump was first elected in 2016, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos told employees that he was committed to maintaining tolerance and diversity at Amazon. This term, however, major companies, including Amazon, donated millions to Trump's inauguration, for example. How has the tech industry changed culturally in the last few years, Monica? I know that's a big question.
Yeah, well, I think it's hard to say whether tech leaders really have changed or that they just feel less pressure to prioritize things like diversity. I mean, I've definitely heard some say that it's more of just like a mask off moment and they kind of always felt this way.
It was always lip service and now they can be more honest.
Yeah, I don't know that I can really litigate that.
Yeah.
But either way, there is a big tonal shift, and CEOs are more empowered to outwardly be anti-regulation, pro-growth, really hard-charging in terms of the sort of pressure on their workforces, and they just feel less worried about alienating workers now because there is a lot less competition for talent. I mean, the tech labor market has just cooled off.
Yeah, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the less investment in fact-checking or moderation at companies like Meta. Monica, is this shift within our tech sector towards a more libertarian or conservative perspective representative of a bigger change in the culture overall?
Another big question.
This is what we bring you here on a Monday to talk about, yeah.
I'm here for it. You know, I'm not a politics reporter. I would say in my observation, it does seem like the culture pendulum is swinging a little bit. But I'm not sure it's exactly libertarian because there seems to be a lot of speech policing when it comes to speaking out about causes on the left. That's something that Veena Dupal, the law professor, also brought up.
There's so much kind of political backlash against anyone who speaks out against this administration, whether that's official backlash in the form of people being interrogated at the border or online sort of doxing. There's just we're in an environment where it's much less easy to speak your mind, to organize, to do these things that have long been considered sort of quintessentially American, and that kind of repressive environment, I think, is not just changing the tactics that workers are using, it's also changing the number of people who are willing to kind of put themselves on the line to stand up for what they believe in.
We talked about the history of protest at some of these companies, Monica, and I guess I have to ask, you know, there had been activities around climate, for example, at Amazon, different, protest movements in the Google workforce. But in the past, did any of this come to fruition with any actual results? Like, did protesters at large tech companies actually change anything about their employees' policies?
Did it ever work?
Yeah, did it ever actually work? Like, again, was this all an illusion?
Well, there are some moments, like in 2018, workers were protesting this Google military contract, and Google came out and said that they were not going to renew it. Amazon Employees for Climate Justice has at various times claimed credit for these sustainability announcements to come out of the company, although Amazon says, like, no, we were always going to do that. It has nothing to do with it. I think the bigger influence was the sense that tech workers shared a certain ethos and they're valuable. And so as a company, you don't want to do something that's going to make it hard for you to recruit and retain talent. Again, not so much a consideration anymore. And I think that is why we're not seeing as much worker activism and as much impact.
Yeah. So have employees lost power in the tech industry, or just the illusion of power, I suppose, is along the same lines?
Yeah. I mean, and if you ask them, I think they say yes, that they have lost power, that it's changed.
So what are you going to be watching for regarding politics and protests in the tech sector moving forward?
Well, I'm going to be watching to see if this activism gets Microsoft to make any material changes. I mean, that would be major. I'm definitely keeping my eyes out for the results of that report, that investigation that Microsoft's conducting, because they have said that they will release those publicly, and we'll hopefully get a little bit more information about what sort of technology support they're providing to the Israeli military. And ultimately, I think, I'm very curious to see whether this causes the company to make a change, because even though workers don't have as much leverage as they used to, this particular issue goes far beyond that, and Microsoft's under pressure from not just workers, but investors, customers. It's something that everybody's kind of got their eyes on right now.
Yeah. I'm also really fascinated at how much the economic place of labor right now has shifted in the tech sector, and I know you follow this really closely. This is all entwined, like the ability to speak out and not be worried about whether or not you can get another job is really closely linked to what's happening in that industry, what's happening with AI. all of it. I mean, I know, this is something that you cover on Booming and your local economy podcast, and questions that you're going to have in the future.
Yeah, it's just been an incredible rate of change. I mean, when I started at KUOW, it was the period of it felt like this renaissance of labor power. It was coming out of the pandemic, and it felt like that was the big story. And then in just a couple of years, it has flipped so much. So things are changing really quickly. I'm glad to always have something to cover, but I really don't know where it's going.
Monica Nickelsburg is KUOW's labor and economy reporter. She is also the co-host of Booming, a weekly podcast about the economic forces shaping our lives here in the Pacific Northwest. Monica, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. This show is only possible because listeners support us. If you're able to give right now, please check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.